Welcome to Occam's Razor. This is the 3rd of October, the month of All Hallows Eve, in the year of our Lord 2025, and this is Blazing Black Fridays, where we do a cool read-through of the best news aggregate for an unobscured eye on current events. I'd like to thank BCF for posting these live streams and for his tireless commitment to publishing a site every day, coming up on 20 years in February. As you may be aware, BCF has just had a fundraiser, so please support his site. We are streaming on 3 platforms, Rumble, X, and TommyTube, so please like, thumbs up, follow, share, and subscribe. Most of all, the chat is up, so please feel free to ask anything. Keep it clean and don't be abusive. Comments drive the algorithm up when I'm not driving it down with forbidden words. After the live stream, please join us on the NAP, the No Answer Period, at 10:30, where we cover the question period prefaced by a review the far-left evil that has beset our land and the events that surround it. The NAP is a daily show, so please join us 45 minutes before the question period, or until the government decides to stop showing up in the lower house. And let's go! Indeed, let's go. And welcome. Let's go straight to his site, do a quick refresh, and start with, oh, excellent, there we are. Okay, so while we wait for this to load, there it is right there. First posting, WTF, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, as I like to say. A posting here from Aunt Polly from X. OFFS. Yes. Oh, for Foxtrot's sake. Table salt. As far as I can tell, it wasn't Charlie Kirk who uttered racial comments. Someone tell Nahani Fontaine that it was her boss, Wab Kinew, that did that. Details emerge of Manitoba NDP leader Wab Kinew's assault drunk driving charges. Oh my. Court heard in 2004 that Kinew directed racial comments at Cabby before physical altercation. Well, that can happen when you have a foreign substance in your body that makes you lose control of your proper functioning synapses in your brain. And then you start doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Think of somebody who knows. For some people, just processing alcohol through your body is not something that they could do. Not everybody has the proper enzymes, by the way. It's an interesting fact. I think it was at 70% of Japanese men do not have the proper digestive enzymes to process alcohol. So that means the alcohol just goes straight to their bloodstream. That's why they just have one can of beer and they are blottoed. Some people are like that. This is also a trait that is shared by many people of Indigenous culture in Canada, is because racially in their culture they were not exposed for generations and centuries to the use of alcohol in cooking or consumption, and then all of a sudden when it was reintroduced, well, it's still taking time for a lot of them to build up that natural ability and immunity, and sometimes you only get that through crossbreeding. So There we are. Well, it's not surprising. Now, on the nap, we were just about to cover this yesterday, but we ran out of time. We only have 45 minutes before our live stream of the question period, and there are so many things to cover, but there was a wonderful exchange. So come on over to the nap. That'll be one of the first things we look at after this. Yes, a wonderful exchange in the Manitoba legislature between the leader of the opposition and him. And you can just see them making arguments and then destroying their own arguments right after that in their broken logic. Cambridge says academics' offensive race views were free speech. Of course they were. They have always been free speech. The right to be offended has never been a right until cultural Marxism came along, and then they started equating pretty words with violence so that they could perform violence in return just for having hearty words thrown at them because, well, that's fair in their world. Cambridge University has dismissed scores of complaints against philosophy fellow who was sacked by his college after a race row. An internal investigation was opened last year after 58 students accused Dr. Nathan Kofnas, an early career academic at Emmanuel College, of discriminating against black scholars. He said in a blog post that under a meritocracy, black people would disappear from almost all high profile positions outside of sports and entertainment, and that the number of black professors at Harvard would approach zero. Well, there has been a lot of concern ever since the late 60s when I just had it on the tip of my tongue. It's something that Dr. Savage brings up all the time, um, where you force your academics to take people based on their race rather than academics. I'll come to me. But we do the same thing, and that's the big aspect of cultural Marxism, right? And that's inculcated right in DEI, where some people will always be more equal than others in order to ensure an equity of result, right? The equity of result is that everything has to be the same regardless of their capacity. And of course, people got upset about that because he was pointing out the actual truth, because people were being put into positions based on how they fit into the cookie cutter rather than how their brains functioned. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, they're doing the Norm Macdonald meme. There are many people in journalism who will try to use this and are already using it to divide. Why the Yom Kippur synagogue attack in Manchester will be exploited by the right wing to sow division in the UK. Yes, it's always wonderful when people, just for the fact that they are pointing out something that is actually occurring, are suddenly labeled something. And this is something the far left does on a regular basis. If you look at Parliament, if you come over to question period, you will see that this is a tactic that they employ constantly. Oh, don't look at the results of my situation, right? Because now you're attacking the greater ideology. You're attacking Canada. You can't point out all the bad things that our party's done to the country and how bad the country is doing. That's being anti-Canadian. That's the same kind of mentality that you would find in communism. Canadian Army vehicle procurement worth up to $1 billion facing serious problems. Indeed, it should be. So this HIMARS procurement is interesting. A Canadian Army procurement project worth up to $1 billion has run into serious technical problems and could be facing cancellation. The program to develop and build light armored vehicle reconnaissance surveillance system, or the LRSS, has been underway for more than a decade. Defense industry sources have warned that the problems affecting the new vehicle fleet could be insurmountable, and the end result might be a cancellation of the project. Oh, this is not the same thing I was thinking about. I was thinking more of the more recent announcement of the HIMARS, which is a rocket artillery system. I actually personally saw a function in Afghanistan, right at the ammo dump. I was doing a run at night, going out to get some more munitions to reload our systems. We have to go out there, do our stuff, anyway. But because the munition dumps set out throughout the camp in CAF, well, they're high value targets. So they had HIMARS installed throughout the camp so that using the radar system in the area, if you had an incoming rocket from somewhere, you could almost immediately pinpoint the launch location, and then a HIMARS kicks in, and these things whoosh out of there. And they go straight to the target, and then just take out a little small grid section, and hopefully you got the guy that shot the rocket at you. It's a very expensive countermeasure, but it seemed to work rather well. And it's produced by Lockheed Martin, which is not this story at all. This is a brand new story. I know nothing about this. My my experience with LRSS goes as far as the Armored Vehicle General Purpose and its three variants that we had in the 1980s, which eventually morphed into so many other combat vehicles that we produce here in Canada. That'd be an interesting story to check. I think I'm going to can we open up a new tab. Let's have a look at that. After Manchester synagogue attack, one victim apparently shot dead by police. Oh boy, what a story that's been, eh? An attack on Yom Kippur. I haven't paying too much attention to it because there's so much happening in Canada. But what I did notice was that the Stabby Stabbersons decided to go out in public and start rioting after one of their own committed crime. It's what we would expect. One of the victims killed at the Manchester synagogue attack appears to have been shot dead by armed police officers. And it's interesting they say armed police officers because, as you know, in the UK, they don't let their cops to be armed, right? They're armed with yellow vests, funny hats, and uh, a Muppet Show attitude. In a statement, the Great Manchester Police Chief Constable Sir Stephen Watson said the Home Office pathologist has provisionally determined that the man had died of gunshot wound. Who? Why were there other inflictions on his body that he might have died of first? The suspect, Jihad al-Shami, did not have a firearm, and only shots were fired by the police officers at the scene. It is believed that the victim was among those behind the synagogue door seeking to prevent the attacker from gaining entry. Was the officer Muslim by chance? Somebody asked. Oh, that's BCF asking. And online at the time, I did notice like somebody was saying, "Who names their kid Jihad?" Well, it's their ideology. This the number one name for children in a few European countries right now is Muhammad because of the amount of people that they have let into their country that were not of their own culture. I think Denmark is one of those places, and a lot of places in the UK, probably all of the UK by now. Oh, and especially in Scotland, forget it. Scotland of old is gone. A synagogue in Manchester, two dead at the hands of a suspected terrorist, says Darren Grimes. The response from Labour's mayors Burnham and Khan let the pro-Palestinian marches fill the streets of both cities on the very same day. No wonder they ended up with riots. While one community is mourning, another is committing acts of. Yes, I don't even need to click the show more. We know exactly what kind of acts they're promoting. They're celebrating. They're celebrating the unliving of Jews because it's in their ideology. And people who say, "Oh, they're being racist," well, why don't you pick up a Quran? Uh, and I'm not sure you will probably won't understand it because it's being written from the longest text to the shortest text. It's not actually in chronological order. And then go ahead and read some hadiths. Yeah. J'accuse, says Melanie Phillips. Britain's political and cultural establishment has blood on its hands over the Manchester Synagogue Yom Kippur attack. Well, of course they do. We've been warning about this for a couple of decades now. They're doing these countries have all been doing it to themselves. And as I intimated in my video, Chaos Agent, which you can find on my site, this has been in the plans for a while. This is all remnants of the system, going back to when the KGB were infiltrating the West. And as Yuri Bezmenov said, ex-KGB agent, taken in by the U.S. and given residency in Canada, he warned, he said 85% of the KGB's activities were to destroy the West from within and establish cells and organizations to do this. And that is why the red diaper doper babies of the 1960s came into fruition from the Marxists that were able to occupy the college system after the Second World War that were pushed forward into there by the Frankfurt School of Thought. And this has been going on ever since. Now, this is just one of the institutions in the systems that's been tapped into. And then throughout the 80s, they developed critical um, thinking, which basically allows you to self-licking ice cream cone any kind of idea and make it into reality, even if it's not. Basically, just destroy anything, any established value or current ethics in circular reasoning through critical theory by constantly attacking it and telling it that it is an oppressive thinking or oppressive ideology because there are these victims and it needs to be changed and there's no other discussion around it. And that through that critical thought process, they pushed in DEI and all the other aspects of that, one of them being the need to globally transition all the population to destroy all the borders, because the greatest threat to a globalist system are independent states that can rebut it. So the only way to do that is through mass invasion. Something the Romans did. They did it plenty of times. They would just go in and just move an entire population out of an area that they conquered and seed their own people in there. This is just a slower version of all this, and this is part of the fallout. Let's see what Melanie has to say.
A short time ago, I emerged from a day spent in
synagogue in
synagogue in
Jerusalem,
Jerusalem.
where I was observing the 25-hour fast of Yom Kippur, to learn of the murderous attack on the Manchester synagogue, where hundreds of Jews were similarly praying on the holiest day of the year. 2 were killed and 4 were left seriously injured. Immediately there were expressions of shock and sympathy from Labour politicians. I'm afraid to say these have curdled the stomach. After all, what on earth did they expect? British Jews have been warning about the lethal incitement against them for a long time, but have been totally ignored. Keir Starmer says now he will do everything possible to keep British Jews safe. The fact is, he has done nothing to keep British Jews safe. He said hatred against Jews is rising once again, and Britain must defeat it once again. But his government and his party have been fueling it. Jews in Britain have been unsafe for years. All synagogues and communal events have long been guarded. Some Jewish schools have been forced to erect barbed wire. But for the past 2 years, since the October 7 massacre in Israel and during the war that has followed in Gaza, Starmer's government has allowed gross incitement against Jews to run riot unchecked. The all too regular demonstrations against Israel, organised by Hamas and the far left and supported by many of his MPs, have heard a constant chanting not only to destroy Israel, but also to kill Jews. And yet, the police have done absolutely nothing to arrest these people, to charge them, even though these are examples of clear criminality. Instead, we've heard bleatings about protecting freedom of speech. Well, freedom of speech is great, but it's different from incitement and intimidation, which has been going on these demonstrations. One demonstrator was captured on video saying, "All Zionists must die." Does Britain really think that that statement is to be applauded as freedom of speech and protected?
Indeed. And that's where cultural Marxism fails, right? Because they will make these arguments that some groups are more equal than others. Therefore, we have to listen to these people because, oh, they've been so hard done by. And you white people, you've had it so easy for so long. So take it. Take it now. Take it forever. Well, anyways. Oh, Melanie Phillips, by the way, if anybody's looked at the thumbnail for this show, you will notice one of the early posts of BCF um, has been following Melanie Phillips. We all have. And the counter jihad movement, as far as what little we can do is publish or write about, as about as far as counter as we can get in our society. But what she has just described is exactly what is happening in Canada as well. right? Albeit Europe is a little more cluttered and packed and compact and stuff, and we're a lot more spread out throughout the country. But these demonstrations that she's talking about, this is what has been going on in large cities like Montreal and Toronto and Ottawa and all the intimidation that comes with it. And it's not just the intimidation against Jews, it's also the intimidation against independent journalists. Like Melanie Phillips is also an independent journalists who have been assaulted and arrested by the police. I remind everyone of Natasha Montreal, that little clip where a police officer goes up to her, touches her, grabs her right in the midriff, right in the abdomen area, is holding her, and she's like, "What the?" She goes to push his hand away, and then next thing you know, three cops pounce on her, throw her to the ground, handcuff her, and then march her away. Well, of course, there's legal proceedings with all that, and it's a good reminder. This is how the cops are acting, and why are they acting this way? Is it because they too have DEI inculcated within their department? Could be. I'd say it's probably a good chance, seeing as that it is pervasive throughout now the entire federal government. There's DEI policy everywhere, in the universities, in the military, in the public service. It is everywhere. And that thought is constantly reinforced through struggle sessions, right? And if your thinking ain't right, your peers are going to let you know. And that's how the system has been designed. It is going to be very difficult to extract if the liberals can never be taken out of power. And if the replacing government wants to do it, because really we haven't heard them say much about it, have we? Not much at all. Goldstein, liberal debt goes from fiscal anchors to anchors away. Indeed. We've been covering a lot of that too. How our economy is an industrial implosion, how our reserves were completely destroyed shortly after the Liberals came into power. So we have no reserves. How over 100,000 citizens have just left Canada since the Liberals came into power and taking their wealth with them. How many businesses are not coming to Canada anymore because we have a system here that says if you're a small business, we're going to tax you to death and take all your wealth, and thank you very much. That's about it. They want to attract large businesses, but they have so many policies and legislation in that it makes it almost impossible for these businesses to come in here and actually make a profit. So, of course, they don't want to come. And I speak primarily, of course, of the energy sector. Energy, which drives everything and which took humanity out of third world status into second and first world. Because without energy, without cheap energy, our society, our current method of society is done. We're already seeing that now. The cost of energy is so high that it transfers to everything else, making everything else more expensive. And what is driving up the cost of energy? Why, the liberals, of course. The liberals and all their policies. Liberal anchors. While Prime Minister Mark Carney insists the Liberals' November 4 budget will adhere to so-called fiscal anchors to ensure the government's fiscal policy encourages long-term economic growth, the problem is the Liberals keep moving the goalpost on what a fiscal anchor means. Well, of course it does, because they will never acknowledge, not a single time, anything that they have actually gotten wrong or reverse course on anything that they have done, because it is not acceptable in their ideology. It's always forward, always forward. And if anybody decides to question what you have, well, then you apply the full force of cultural Marxism against them, right? You will call them names. You will belittle them. You will say that they are the oppressor, that you have to fear them for whatever reason. They'll make it up. They will point to all the other failures of the other person or even make them up. In fact, project their own failures upon the other person just to destroy them so that they can remain in power and keep this stack of money going to their pockets. Horton, the Combating Hate Act, a dangerous step towards symbolic censorship. What was this picture? Oh, yes, Raiders of the Lost Ark picture. Halloween tweets police. Yes, right. That's like what Melanie was talking about here. Weren't the cops doing anything? Maybe because they're incarcerating 12,000 Britons a year for hurty words online. Yes, bad words are like violence. So you get the Muppets showing up at your house and then throwing people in jail. And of course, when they don't have any room to throw people in jail for posting mean tweets, so they have to let, rapists, murderers, extortionists, and all manner of real criminals out on the streets so that they can put in their political prisoners. That's what's happening in the UK, and that is what Canada wants for you, Canadians, once they put in Bill C9. That's right, Bill C9 will allow for warrantless arrest, and you won't even get to know your accuser, and they will show up at your door and say, hey, we heard you said something mean. And we're like, what are you talking about? Ah, this. And they'll show you and they'll say, well, that's not, well, it upset somebody, so we're going to have to take you to jail. And like, excuse me, who said that? Oh, we're not allowed to let you know. And then they throw you in court, and then your court says, oh, well, we can throw you in jail for life, and then off you go. Of course, this is the full extent of the stupidity of Bill C9, but that's exactly what could happen. Unless, of course, Bill C8 comes into play, and they just think you're too much of a threat to even go through that procedure. They'll just turn off your internet and your phone, and you won't even be able to tell anyone that the government did it to you, because if you do, you go to jail. And any minister can do it. That's Bill C8. So, yeah, you want to talk about Jane just step towards symbolic censorship. Self-censorship, like Gad Saad has said, is the most effective censorship of all. So what you do is you put in procedures of fear to make people scared so that they have to self-censor. For those who may not be aware, the Combating Hate Act, proposed chiefly by Justice Minister Sean Fraser, Bill C9, is a piece of legislation intended to protect communities and places of worship from hate crimes. At its core, the bill seeks to criminalize the display of hate symbols. Examples include swastikas, the double sigrun, and other insignia associated with terrorist organizations as outlined in the criminal code. Do you hear that? That's because we already have laws. We've already had laws that deal with all of this, but the liberals will not enforce them. They will not push anyone to enforce them. And they made it so by introducing that other legislation of Bill C-75 to let all the criminals out on the street continually to destroy society so that they have to bring in this legislation. This is what liberals do. This is what communists do. This is what cultural Marxists do. This is how they take over your society. They destroy society, and that's exactly what they've done over the past 10 years. Every single thing that they have done is enrich themselves and their friends. We're much better off. No, the fleeing Canadians have obviously shown you that's not happening. And the fact that you've got, what, a quarter of your population dependent on food banks or skipping a meal so that their children can eat, and you have crime out of control, was it 1,600 assaults did they say a day? What did they come out to an assault a minute or something happening in Canada? It's insane. Crime is bloody out of control. In fact, crime is so bad in Canada, it's now worse than what it is in the United States. Crime is worse in Canada than the United States, and the level of the standard of living in Canada is now lower than that of Mississippi, the poorest state in the United States. So, along with the UK, somebody else that was screwed over by the food banker Prime Minister Carney, as Andrew Lawton likes to call him. Yeah, we don't need a banker, we need a food banker, is what Andrew said. Yes, all of it. It's all bloody connected. Criminal. And this act, oh my goodness. And of course, if you listen to them in Parliament, right, where the Liberals saying, well, you need to get behind us, you need to get, that's all they do, eh? You need to vote with us, you need to vote with us. Yeah, but we're not going to because you've got some pretty nasty shite in that bill that needs to be dealt with, right? And then, of course, this is going to go to committee and it's going to be slowed down. And what the liberals do is they'll point to this in question period and say, see, the conservatives don't care about justice. They're holding up this bill. Of course, they will never talk about the fact that they basically want to arrest you without warrant. And that's basically in the bill, right? So it says the attorney general is completely out of the picture. It's just the police and the local prosecutor. He will decide whether or not you will be arrested because somebody complained about what you said or displayed something that they don't agree with. There are already laws in the books. Was it somebody, a couple recently had mowed a swastika? The Nazi swastika, not the Hindu swastika, which goes the other way. In their front lawn, neighbors complained, they got charged, they got fined. Why? Because there's already laws on the book. We don't need this. Liberals need this to hang on to power. Liberals need this to turn Canada into a Kafkaesque nightmare. 2,500% spike in Google search results for Trump and fascists show Dems violence incitement problem. Oh, yeah, yeah, we do have an incitement problem on the far left because they think it's normal, because it has been trained into their brains by cultural Marxism. In the heated arena of American politics, words have always been weapons, but over the past year, the left's rhetoric has escalated to a level that not only poisons discourse, but also incites violence. As we approach the end of President Trump's first year back in the White House, a year marred by political assassinations and rising extremism, it's useful to understand just how much Democrats and their allies in media, academia, rent a mob, and activist circles have ramped up incendiary language. Of course, they're desperate because they know their message does not resonate with people who have common sense. So, like the communists of old, who managed to build mountains of skulls in their honor, you don't get there by building a massive dam in Cambodia using bodies of human beings through niceness. You get there by doing this kind of stuff, by demonizing your opponent and then rationalizing why you need to kill them. That's a component of the far left, not of people on the right. President Trump gives the globalists another lesson, but more are needed indeed because they're just like, of course, he's stating the obvious. And just like cultural Marxism, the most of them, right? They're pretty upset that he just, and they did it to themselves. He broke his teleprompter, so of course he's going to go off on a rant. Donald Trump's address to the UN once again has challenged the failing, bloated institution, especially when it's damage to our country and its constitutional order by allowing globalist elites to chip away at our sovereignty in order to serve the international community of the New World Order globalist elites. Much of our foreign policy errors and crises spring from the near century of UN's bad ideas and feckless idealism. Yes, unfortunately, Canada had a big hand in setting up the UN, right? No wonder it's so corrupt. Because look at Canada today. We're a kleptocratic state, and Canada's done nothing about securing the United States. Carney calls, now let's read this here. Wielding a signature straight talk, Trump delivered a much needed home truth. What is the purpose of the United Nations? He asked, and quickly answered, for the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve wars. Indeed. Now, Carney calls Indonesia trade deal game changing, but Labor says it's a step backwards. Labor? United States labor? Sorry, UK labor? This is interesting. The current government is celebrating a new trade deal with Indonesia, but labor voices are sounding the alarm over weakened or worker protections compared to recent deals that Canada has inked. In a press release, Prime Minister Mark Carney's Nepean, Ontario office described the Canada-Indonesia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement as game-changing, noting that it is the first bilateral agreement with a member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Asian. Finally, the deal was a pillar of Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy and part of a growing effort to diversify the country's trading markets. Well, that's all very nice. Now, comparatively, Canada already does trade with Indonesia. I believe it about 1%, less than 1%, thereabouts. And it's compared to the $1 trillion of business we do with the United States that the liberals are ignoring and destroying this trade agreements with by doing everything to piss the United States off. This is next to nothing. But it's funny that they got this deal just at the same, just about the same time that there was a massive safety accident at the world's second largest mine, which is in Indonesia, massive open pit mine, big accident there. So the mine is shut down for a bit. So their economy is going to be in a bit of a tatters. And of course, Indonesia, right? They've got their own laws. It is an Islamic nation. As Carney says, Muslim values are Canadian values. Maybe that's why he went there. But overall, how much of a trade deal is this going to be? How much investment are we going to get out of this? When I say investment, as in the fact that we started this deal, what is the long-term goal that they're talking about? Nothing's going to happen, really, because Carney's not going to be in power that long for whatever deal he's working on. Now, it's interesting that he goes to another country that is exploiting its natural resources, probably to get, natural resources from them, but still holding back Canada's ability to have our own. January 6th was America's Reichstag fire. Indeed, it was, and of course, the mainstream media is not covering a lot of it, right? Because they were complicit. They were completely complicit in this entire thing themselves in pushing the false narrative. And of course, as we know, it's come out that well, there were over 300 federales embedded within this. It was 275 that they know of, and the rest of them were already in there in civilian clothes. You don't really know who they were. Hitler was the original democratically elected, not by a majority, but rather a plurality, as allowed by the Weimar Republic's constitution. It was a turning point for all of world history. The Nazis, being ambitious tyrants, leapt at any possible opportunity to expand their grip on Germany. So, on February 27th, 1933, just 4 weeks after Hitler was sworn in as chancellor, the fire struck the German parliament building was at least partially blamed on the Bolshevik agitators. Sound familiar? Germany's then president, Paul von Hindenburg, issued a decree suspending all civil liberties in order to facilitate the rounding up and disposal of communists, and thus Hitler became an absolute dictator. Right, so that's what they tried. They tried to do that, but unfortunately for them, the United States already had a constitution, which meant that they had a lot of hoops to go through. And now, eventually, all those hoops are showing that the insurrection was a controlled Fedsurrection. How the West failed the test of the Danish cartoons controversy. Oh my goodness me, is this still going on? The Muhammad cartoon situation? Geez, we can go all the way back to when Ezra Levant had published these in a Western Standard and then had to defend himself. 20 years on, Europe has embraced Islamic blasphemy codes and abandoned free speech. Indeed, on October 30, September 2005, under the headline, The Face of Muhammad. The headline was not entirely accurate. One of the cartoons made fun of Yılan's Postin's editors for commissioning the series, while another showed Islamist suicide bombers being turned away from heaven. Stop, stop, we have run out of virgins, ran the caption. At least Kurt Westergaard's, now infamous for chimed with the title, he had drawn Muhammad wearing a turban containing a bomb, accompanied by a Muslim declaration of faith. There is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God. The cartoon was undoubtedly provocative, as indeed they were intended to be. They stood firmly in a long-standing anti-clerical tradition of satire. And a lot of people don't remember, Kurt, somebody tried to kill him that showed up at his house with an axe, chopping through the door, trying to get at him. This is the insanity. So what do? Oh, now nobody can show cartoons because we have to show deference to our invaders. Increasing number of Americans say violence may be needed to get U.S. back on track. Well, a number of Americans don't seem to realize that there's been a lot of violence already on the far left. Shall we go and look at Black Lives Matter, how they lost their minds over a criminal, George Floyd, who died of an overdose, but everyone thought that the cop killed him for using an approved hold that he was actually trained to use by his department. And of course, who can we blame from that, right? The mainstream media, the lamestream media, the prostitutes, as they are sometimes referred to push that narrative to create the violence. Well, there's been a lot of far left violence already, and they're ready to do more because they've already shown that they can, and they continue to shout that they will. And even here in Canada, we have a lot of them doing that. Unfortunately, they're supported by the government. While a majority of the U.S. citizens continue to maintain that violence won't help fix the problem facing other nations, an increasing minority are beginning to disagree, according to a new poll. A Marist Institute of Public Opinion poll of 1,477 adults conducted in partnership with NPR and PBS great public radio and PBS, these two violently anti-Trump organizations, last week found that 3 in 10 of those agreed, 90%, or strongly agreed, 11%, with the notion that Americans may have to resort to violence in order to get their country back on track. Wow. So you usually have a lot of far left people following these PBS and NPR. So of course, it's normal that they would default to violence to get their way. Portland Antifa suspect quivers with fear after being arrested over red paint vandalism at ICE Depot. Good. We're way over time. It's usually supposed to be half an hour, and I got to get ready for the next show. So this will be the last story, and after that, we're doing our outro. Portland Antifa suspect quivers with fear. Well, yes, I never got to see this. An anti-ICE protester quivered with fear after being detained following a huge demonstration against the presence of the federal agents in Portland. The man allegedly dumped red paint over an ICE facility in Oregon City during the protest on Tuesday, according to Fox News reporter Bill Milugin. The individual was seen trembling uncontrollably after being taken into custody on Wednesday night in footage taken by Milugin and shared to his X account. Let us look at the video.
Fuck yeah!
Well, let's remember, a lot of these people are being taken advantage of, right? A lot of these people have been brainwashed. They've been told lies. They've been fed lies. That's how you capture a group of people to do what you want. In order to get somebody to do violence for you, that takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of planning, right? And it takes a lot of evil. So you have to ask yourself, which side is calling for violence every day? And which side is not? Thank you all for coming out to Blazing Capital Fridays. Please join us next week, where we will see what BCF has for us on his site, where we do our cold read-through. And we will do our outro. If I can get this working properly. What's going on here? I got the right... Oh, that's the wrong one. I should have been doing this while I was talking. Come on, outro. Intro, outro. Transition. Bye-bye.